Good evening and welcome everyone. Closed captioning is available for this program. If you would like to enable the captions, please do so at the bottom of your screen. My name is Brendan Emser, and I'm the Senior Managing Editor of Aperture Magazine and the editor of the recent publication Ming Smith, an Aperture Monograph. On behalf of Aperture, I would like to offer our respect to the Lenape peoples, past, present, and future. We, as an organization, acknowledge that Aperture is located on the island known as Manhattan, in Lenapehoking, the Lenape homeland. I encourage everyone who is watching this evening to engage with and learn from Indigenous communities whose ancestral territories you yourselves are currently tuning in from. Through our publications and public programs, Aperture is committed to dismantling colonial legacies and supporting the work of Indigenous photographers. I'm truly honored to introduce tonight's program, the second in a series of 4 virtual programs associated with the presentation of Working Together, the photographers of the Kaminga Workshop, currently on view at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York through March 28th. Each program features photographers who joined the Kaminga Workshop in its formative years and consistently remain central to the group and its dialogue. The conversations bring together members of the workshop with scholars, critics, and other artists to discuss their individual work as photographers, as well as the history and legacy of their collective efforts. This series has been organized as a partnership between Aperture and the Whitney. For those in the audience who aren't familiar with Aperture's work, we are a non-for-profit foundation that was established in 1952 to provide a common ground for the advancement of photography. Through Aperture's publications, exhibitions, and public programs, we connect the photo community with inspiring photography and ideas. This series also coincides with the release of Kaminga artist Ming Smith's Aperture Monograph, which was co-published in November 2020 with Documentary Arts. As many of you may already know, the Kaminga Workshop was formed in 1963 in New York City, and the early members initially came together in the spirit of friendship and support. The artists had different backgrounds and experience with photography, but they shared a common purpose: to pursue photography as an art form and to make photographs of and for the Black community as they saw and experienced them, in contrast with how they were often portrayed in art, media, and popular culture at the time. Kaminga artist Louis Draper explained their perspective when he said, "We speak of our lives as only we can." Tonight's program features Kaminga Workshop artist James Jimmy Maness, who pursued filmmaking alongside his work in photography. As the exhibition catalog notes, Maness was the president of the Kaminga Workshop in the mid-1960s. His photography and film projects shared the fundamental ideals of the Kaminga Workshop, including an emphasis on portraying African-American life. We will be showing a remarkable short film that Maness made in 1968 to capture the response of his community in Brooklyn to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Following the film, Maness will be joined in conversation with the artist and filmmaker Ramel Ross. I want to extend a special thanks tonight to Carrie Springer, who, with Mia Mathias, organized the Whitney's presentation of Working Together, as well as to Dr. Sarah Eckhart, who curated Working Together for the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and to the brilliantly talented Ramel Ross, whose work we were very proud to publish in Aperture Magazine in 2018. I think Ramel is the only artist we've ever worked with at Aperture who has gone on to be nominated for an Academy Award. For all of my colleagues at Aperture, we are so grateful to the Whitney for this essential intergenerational dialogue, and we thank you in the audience for joining us. Finally, thank you, Mr. Jimmy Maness, and all of the artists of the Kaminga Workshop for your incredible work and inspiring example. I'm now happy to turn it over to Carrie Springer to introduce the artists.
Thank you, Brendan, and thanks to Aperture for your collaboration on the events related to the Working Together exhibition. I'm Carrie Springer, and I'm an assistant curator at the Whitney, where it's been my great privilege to organize the presentation of Working Together, the photographers of the Camoinge workshop. I'm pleased to introduce Jimmy Manis and Ramel Ross for tonight's program, the second in the Whitney's public programs held in conjunction with the exhibition. The focus of tonight's program is Jimmy Manis's film King is Dead, 1968, made on the streets of Brooklyn just after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Jimmy Manis is a photographer, filmmaker, and teacher, and an early member of the Camoinge workshop. In the early 1960s, Manis took photographs in the streets of New York while also studying commercial photography at New York Institute of Photography. From 1963 to 66, he was director of photography for the Bedford-Stuyvesant Youth in Action program. And in the late 1960s, he taught at the South Bronx Community Action program and was the director of photographic workshops at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. In 1967, Manis enrolled in the Graduate Institute of Film and Television at NYU. Among his films are King is Dead, which you'll see tonight, Kick, about a woman's efforts to help her husband overcome addiction, The Folks, a documentary of 9 residents of Bed-Stuy in Harlem, and Naifa, an animated film for children. In the 1970s, Manis worked for the Ministry of Information and Culture in Guyana as a co-director of photographic workshops and the film planning unit. He co-directed with Brian Stewart Young the film Agro Seasman in 1975. Camoinge members Sean Walker, Ray Francis, Danny Dawson, and Herman Howard worked with Manis in the production of that film and other projects. After returning to New York from Guyana, Manis and Dawson made the short documentary Head and Heart in 1977 about the artist Tom Feelings. In the 1980s, Manis continued to write and direct films, including 2 short documentaries on the discrimination faced by Black Vietnam veterans. To talk with Jimmy about King is Dead and his work as a member of the Camoinge workshop, we're thrilled to have another artist, Ramel Ross, whose work also spans photography and film. And this is Ramel's, a photograph by Ramel that you see on the screen. Ross is a visual artist, filmmaker, and writer based in Rhode Island and Alabama. He is perhaps best known for his photographs taken in Hale County, Alabama, and for his feature film, Hale County, This Morning, This Evening, 2018, that won a special jury award for creative vision at the 2018 Sundance Film Festival, and was also nominated for an Oscar at the 91st Academy Awards. Ramel's practice emerges in and starkly breaks from the history of documentation in the South. His work has appeared at the Hammer Museum, the ICA London, MoMA, the National Gallery of Art, and the Walker. A selection of his photographs is currently included in the exhibition, but Still It Turns, Recent Photography from the World, that was curated by Paul Graham for the International Center of Photography in New York. Ross is also an assistant professor of art in Brown University's Visual Art Department. So we're going to begin the program by showing you King is Dead, which will be followed by a conversation between Ramel and Jimmy. When I first saw King is Dead, I was particularly struck by the immediacy and extraordinary energy in Manis's film. It is also a really insightful bridge between the artist's photographic work that you can see in the Whitney's exhibition and his documentary films. King is Dead highlights Manis's ability to visually portray in still and moving images an emotional current within himself and within a community that he knows and is part of, with clarity and intensity. I think you'll find the rawness of emotion in this film almost palpable. Following the screening, we'll open up the conversation between Ramel and Jimmy. And near the end of the program, we'll take some questions from the audience. So I hope you'll put your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen during the program. So thank you, and without further ado, we'll begin the film, King is Dead.
That's right, we should get together and kill Whitey. We should do something about it. Kill them. We should get together and blow them up. They ain't people, they're animals. They're not human, they're animals.
They're beasts.
Kill them, I'll pick them out with
Bobby.
That time.
Come here, Bobby. Kill all the beasts. Come here, Bobby. You come here. Come here.
What you gonna do?
Hold it, right here, baby.
All right, you can film this. They fighting about King's death. You film that right there. That'll be cool, man. You don't think nothing about it, then, man? I don't think nothing. He's a black man. It's a white man. That's what I think about it. See, if they care anything about us, we're trying to make the Board of Education get on our side and have some respect for the deaf. That's right. They don't have no respect. That's why we out here. We ain't got no respect for him. We ain't got no respect for him, so we don't go to school. That's right. Right, brother? And all the little got their lights on. Right here, they got the fucked up. Well, that's respect. That's being us respect. They still gotta give us that's how you act with respect.
I know you go push it.
Well, I did it. I did it. What
do you think about the murder of Martin Luther King?
Well, I think that's no good.
Well, what I think about it is, I feel like the rest of the colored people around here, that something should be done about it. I mean, right now they still haven't found the murder yet. And I think that we should be able to, start something around here in order to find out what's what. We don't even know nothing.
What do you think you ought to start?
Well, I think we ought to start for our freedom. That's what I'm for. I'm for freedom.
How do you do that? How do you get that?
How do you do that? The only thing I know is kill like they kill. That's my proposition. Kill like they kill.
All right,
Take
let's
two.
Yay! Now.
Take 10 for every one they kill.
Down by the whitey, motherfucker. Down by the whitey. Down with the school. Riot! We're gonna riot. Yeah. We're gonna put the whiteys in their place.
One thing, this is Negro himself. This is all Negro, actually. This is not so, man, because our people, they have just as many intelligence as they have finger poppers. This is not necessarily, man, the expression of the ghetto. This finger popping and jack, this ain't right and all that jazz, you know what I mean? Everybody, this is a thing, this is a mood, actually, that's all, man. It's not necessarily a way of expressing yourself correctly. Because if you don't like something, you have to get it across to the people. You're not supposed to go along with whichever way they want to project you and your stereotype, because they say the black man is lackadaisical and he's this and that and the other, but he's not really, And the way I feel my thing is this ain't it. This ain't where it's at, man. I don't feel this way, And it's all a plot. The whole thing is a plot, man. As long as they can project us like this to the rest of the world, they'll say, well, we don't need anything. We don't want anything anyhow. We're satisfied popping our fingers and jazz. As far as we're concerned, we need an incident jack to get hold of silence.
They would say now the Negro is inferior by nature because of Noah's curse. And so one brother during the days of slavery wanted to justify slavery, and he had set his argument up on the framework of Aristotle's thinking. He could say now, all men are made in the image of God. And then came his minor premise, God, as everybody knows, is not a Negro, therefore the Negro is not a man. They argue now on more cultural and subtle sociological grounds. The Negro is not culturally ready for integration. And if you integrate schools and if you integrate too much, the Negro will pull the white race back a generation. And then they go on to say, that the Negro is inherently criminal and all of these things. Now, these people never say to us that many of these problems are problems of urban dislocation, and that poverty, ignorance, and disease breed crime, whatever the racial group may be, that these conditions are environmental and not racial. And it is a torturous logic to use the tragic results of segregation and discrimination as an argument for the continuation of it. But I submit to you this evening that this way of nonviolence will help us not to seek to rise from a position of disadvantage to one of advantage, thus subverting justice. We will not substitute one tyranny for another, for black supremacy is as dangerous as white supremacy. The time to do right is now, and that the time is always ripe to do right.
Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
Okay, how you doing? It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again too. What an amazing film! It's truly amazing. And before we start, I just wanted to thank you and your members for the work that you've done over the past, and also just like this film is moving in a way that in films I really haven't come across so often, especially older films. And I think a lot of it has to do, most of it's just its sort of fluid organizing structure. It has a sort of emotional logic as opposed to a narrative logic. I think, the score exists more like the wind than it does anything else. I think that, you find a way to go from anger and resentment to hope, like the film ends in hope. And so I wonder, what was your process like to sort of compile these almost, and even with the images speak back and forth to each other. They are in direct dialogue with their repetition. And so it's experimental, but yet it has a really the deepest human touch I've seen in a while. And so, yeah, I wonder about how you did that, how you accomplished that.
But, whatever you see in terms of that energy, whatnot came from the people. I mean, there were some pieces of that film that you would not have wanted me to put in here, and I probably would be here showing you that we had to keep out because there were some people really ready to go down because the anger and the fear that we all felt at the time, me, anybody, but I think a great number of Americans felt was a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I had to do something. And I happened to be at NYU at the time, and I got some people from the street, and I said, let's go. And none of us got paid, but NYU had the facility, and they didn't stop us, But when you got to the streets, what you start seeing is that the soul of the folks, again, was angry and fear. And where do we go from here? I mean, because if they could do that to him, who was talking common sense, and nobody can say he wasn't talking common sense. I don't care what clan you belong to, it's common sense, all right? Then where do we stand? What chance do I have? And that's what you felt on the street, and that's what I tried to capture, I never thought that, and I'll be very frank with you, that the film would get the kind of response that it has, because the first part of it is so angry that I thought it would turn people off. I mean, like I said, I could have put some harder stuff in there, but it wouldn't have worked then,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
the anger and the fear was vicious.
Yeah. Well, I think I mean your instincts. You shot the film, if I'm correct, right?
They swept the floors too.
Yeah, all the hats.
Bathrooms. don't like to talk about that part. You see, when you're making a film, right, Jimmy Manis and the whole team had to be everything.
Yeah.
Not like a union job where you have, a person come in. We borrowed cars, we rented cars, and which NYU paid, of course, and whatnot. But we had to clean the cars up after, because we had to eat the cars. I mean, some cases we had to sleep in the cars because where were we going to sleep? There were no hotels for us or anything like that, So cars were our home when we were out shooting. So it was. You had to do something. That whole director, producer, with this particular film, everybody had to be everybody. And Vika Tarabanov, she was from Bulgaria. She was out there with us, and she never, as a European, she never felt any problem with that. And we had George Hayes, who was a good sound man from the streets, but I brought him into NYU, all right, because I know NYU said the facility, and he used to be on drugs, but he gave it up, and he came in to work with us and whatnot. And George went on to have a fairly decent career in sound engineering in New York and whatnot. I tried to use any step I got to bring some folks along with me, and it's like T.T. Griffith is doing now with me, is he's bringing me along with his vision of where Jimmy should be, So it's nice. VMFA did a fantastic job. Lou's sister, who brought the photographs to Miss Eckhart down at VMFA, fantastic. I mean, she kept the work together. And then VMFA said, yes, okay? They did a fantastic job. And then along come you folks from New York. And y'all did a wonderful job. But there's two different cultures here now. VMFA has flowers, and we talked about this the other day. Wood, and, it's very Victorian, all right? And then you come into the Whitney and you see spit polish and a sharp edge knife, that's a decor. And that's the Whitney, and both
that Mason-Dixon line, it's that Mason-Dixon line,
Well, it might be that, but I think more than the Mason-Dixon line, I think that Northern folks have, I think, a more open view of how to present photographs, and these photographs, which are basically Black photographs and whatnot, needed both. You know where I'm coming from? They need both, all right? Because I have people coming up in the street to me now saying, I hear you with Griffith. I know about him, I went up to see the thing. They talk in this kind of terms, I went up to see the thing and you got to wait online to get in. You got to make an appointment. I said, well, why are you so mad about it and whatnot? He said, it should have been in the Black community. So, I mean, what you going to do? Win. You know what I'm saying?
Can't win at all.
But both entities did a fantastic job for the photographs. And I thank y'all.
Well, the work truly it's astounding. I talk a lot when I talk about my work about the general lack of poetic images of the past of people of color, coming from people of color, specifically the Black community. And your images, the images of those in your workshop just fills a huge void. And as I mentioned before, I'm really excited to share them with my students and look at them in depth. But Jimmy, you have such a beautiful instinctual eye, and I think it comes through in The King. The King is Dead, because you don't settle on the frame. I feel like the camera is kind of moving between looking, searching, experiencing. It's like it sort of embodies the energy that is happening in front of it. And so that sort of community-ness, that the translation that happens across the lens. How did you all develop your skills and your talents? You would just shoot, or was...
Like I was just saying to you, once I got into NYU, after coming from the New York Institute of Photography, which is like, I wanted to do a commercial thing with the New York Institute of Photography. I wanted to understand commercial photography more because I was doing so much street stuff. But then coming into NYU, I came into a broader community of Bulgarian, a brother from the Lower East Side used to be on drugs. Fred Arnow, who was really a script person and the person who kept us straight. He was Jewish brother from Massachusetts. You know, so you're meeting all these cultures here. You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then I come along with jazz talking about Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane. And it was a nice mix, man. You know,
Yeah.
and they were at my back. Okay. In other words, you see that camera moving and whatnot, but they were saying, Jimmy, get that, Jimmy, you know. I said, well, it's only one lens. It's only, leave me alone, you know. And so they were seeing things that I might have been missing. They were, you know, and I had to get it. I had to get it, you know. So I did the photography, you know, but Viqua did the editing and Fred Arnow and whatnot, but it was all under my direction, yes.
Yeah. Jimmy, can you talk a little bit? I've heard you say a couple of times like the soul of the community and the soul of the people. And I think, you know, it's connected, of course, to Du Bois's The Soul of Black Folks. But I love that approach to the humanity that can exist between, you know, media and the medium of photography and film. And humanity. And so how do you think about the soul?
You can't, any photographer, any artist cannot get away from the people who gave him decent advice. You know, Greaves up at Channel 13, who put cameras in our hands for Black Journal and told us to go out and get the story, you know, and told us to be on our own. And then we came into Roy DeCarava in the Camonga workshop. And every Sunday, every second Sunday, I believe, I still think it, every second Sunday, we'd meet at his house and his wife, Terry, would cook for us and whatnot. And he would tell us, you know, you got to preserve your work. You got to preserve your work. Don't just let it lay around. Put it someplace that is safe and whatnot. And you start seeing what these people are telling you. They're putting tools in your hands. They're giving you professional exposure and whatnot. So, when you go searching for the soul of the Black people, it becomes easy, you know? I mean, you know, getting there, then you got to get the picture, you know? And I don't know, people say that they like the work, and I say, okay, because I'm never satisfied. I've never been satisfied with my work. And I'll be very frank with the whole world. I'm not satisfied with That King Is Dead. I know I could have did better. You know, I'm not satisfied, but it is what it is, and we move on. Yeah. Now we're looking to move into Jimmy is still working phase, and T.T. Griffith is my managing director, has given me the platform to roll at 79 years old, and God has given me a little bit of health, and we're going to start working on completing my Coney Island series, which we know was left when I went down to Guyana, was left in hanging and whatnot. And I was always fascinated by the amusement park in Coney Island. I don't know, you know, my father used to take us out there because we were a big family. And I had that little camera that they gave me, which was a Brownie Hawkeye. Yeah. And I think there's some still negatives from me and my father and the family going out to Coney Island, because I mean, that's what big families did in New York. You know, they, in the summer, they went to the beach. Yeah. Like everybody else tried to do, you know, go someplace. But the fascination of building these things and people going on around in tunnels and all that is always fascinated me. So we're going to finish that, and then we're going to move on to finishing the drug series. You know, I've devoted, you notice, a whole lot of time to drugs in my work, okay, one way or the other. And because drugs is something, the street drugs we're talking about, that I saw killing a whole lot of people around me, you know, and male, female, it destroyed whole communities, okay? And we know why, because of money. I mean, that's the only reason I could see it, because I can't see the drugs bringing anybody even pleasure. Because if you look at some of my films, there's not a whole lot, and some of the work that I'm gonna be doing with the drug series, ain't nothing pretty about it, baby. It ain't
I mean, imagery, yes, but yeah, content is pretty dark. Jimmy, are both these photographic and filmic projects, or are you thinking photographs? Are you thinking specifically film?
The drug series and the Coney Island series is going to be still.
Okay.
And I'm trying to talk Griffin to let me shoot it in negative. I want to go back to shooting it in black and white and color transparency and black and white negative. But he says you're a fool. He said, it's digital now. We got black prints. What are you talking about? That's 60 years ago. So I got to listen to him, you know.
Yeah.
Because it is 60 years ago, man. That's what I'm talking about, you know. You got to be real.
Yeah.
But and then the last in the series that I'm talking about will be a couple of films on the Black church.
Okay.
On the Black church. I've always been fascinated by the whole soul of the church in our community with the soul of the people in our community. Mm-hmm. And the preachers, we were fortunate enough in my family to have preachers who were a little bit like Martin Luther King. You know, they put their people first. And then if you wanted to put something in the coffers, come on. Mm-hmm. But they would ask us as a family to come and work in the church for nothing, helping other people. And I would take my camera with me, of course, and photograph. Mm. I would develop the film in my tub in the house when everybody went to sleep. I would make sure it was dry before everybody got up to use the tub, and I'd cut it down, and I would take it down to the drugstore, my negatives, to the drugstore to send them off, because I didn't have an enlarger. So from the 9, 10, 11 years old, we were involved with the church very much, and I love the church.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
it got us through. Not only the church, a whole lot of stuff got us through, but when you look at the power of the church in the Black community, it's complex, because there's some nasty things that go along with that too. You know what I mean? A whole lot of dumb stuff went on in there too, but I think it helped us through.
Yeah. No, I think the church has been, an enormous organizing principle for our aesthetic and for our spirit. And just, when we're talking about survival, which is, the story of Black people in the US, you need something, you need some place to come together, you need some place to mourn. Yeah.
The Native Americans had it. The ones who survived, they had a place where they could go and do their traditional stuff. We didn't have that though. I've always admired the so-called Native American people, because I wanted to do something on them, but I don't know how I would approach that, because it's going to get very complex. But they had their religion and they had their culture that they could go back and, but we were stripped of everything.
Yeah. That brings me to us to jazz. I know you mentioned Ornette Coleman and jazz being sort of the atmosphere of the time, but how does it manifest in your work? Is it sort of like almost you have headphones on and you're working and you're trying to be fluid, or are you trying to mimic some of the principles?
Headphones.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Headphones. We didn't have
boombox. The boombox.
The boombox.
Yeah, right.
I'm just kidding with you, but we had our little portable radios and boom boxes and radios in the cars and stuff like that. And I know where you're coming from, because the headphones now and that cell phone is a powerful instrument, man. And I respect it. I'm not trying to put it down. I'm embracing it, But y'all got to teach me how to use it though, because it gets kind of confusing sometimes. But yes, we had jazz around us all the time. And I had jazz around me all the time. When I was down in NYU working with Tara Bonoff, we had, she didn't like John Coltrane. She was a more softer person, but she loved Coleman. Didn't understand where it was going, but loved his work, So there was always some music around any kind of production when I was down in Guyana making the films down there, especially Agro Seas, man. We had music all over the place, And I was just thinking, when y'all came on tonight, I was hoping that y'all have a little music in the background.
The elevator music, the Zoom music. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, you know, whatever y'all choose, you know. But
Yeah.
I just can't conceive working without music. Whenever we're working, you know, recently, you know, those little things that I'm doing a lighting thing on Ocean Park, Ocean Avenue in Brooklyn, just on the lights on the facades of the buildings. This is a little project that, you know, that has just got to keep working and whatnot. And you know, what I'm seeing is that digital camera is all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of it. You know, it can do a whole lot of things with it.
Jimmy, are you kind of adverse to color, or are you stick with black and white because of what's your relationship to the two forms?
I'm totally in love with black and white. You know, as you can see.
Yeah.
I had choice, like doing the folks. I could have shot the folks in color because I had some backing with the folks. I could have shot Kick in color. I could have shot a whole lot of stuff in color. But I didn't feel that color at the time got to the real soul of our people for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Talking about drugs, whether I was talking about church, whether I was talking about husband or wife trying to go a problem, it always presented itself to me in black and white. Not that I dismissed color. I studied color. I worked in color. I worked in color labs, Slatterchrome, all, you know, for many years. But the black and white seemed to bring more about of what we were, especially at that time.
Yeah. When
I went down to Guyana, I shot in black and white. I could have shot in color. Guyana hit me as a black and white venue, you know, for my work. I don't know why. People say, it's so colorful down there. You got all the trees right there. I say, well, yeah, you know, but there's some color. I shot some color down there. But the black and white, it fascinated me, whether in Guyana or in the streets of New York.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I guess that first camera, I got that little Brownie Hawkeye. Once I got there wasn't no color film in there. I guess you could put color in there, but I always put black and white in there, and it just kept it that way.
Yeah. Jimmy, have you photographed the same way regardless of the context? So like when you go out on the street to photograph for your portfolio, or when you're taking photographs with your family, or when you're, you know, at NYU, or when you're doing something in like your Coney Island project, like I wonder how, or if you sort of like change modes when you're shooting for, I guess, personal or like maybe family archive type images, or if you're out in the community, or how you navigated those lines.
I try to split it up. I mean, if you know, if Griff and I are around here and I'm photographing, that's one thing. But Roy taught us, okay, and I said taught us, all right, to have a vision in mind when you have a project. Just don't let your enthusiasm for the project, all right, get to you. You know, you must have a plan to talk about what you're talking about, which means that you're going to have to go and do a little research. You're going to have to sit there and look at, be a part of the subject matter if you can. And whatnot. With Kick, you know, I stayed with George when his wife wasn't there, as he mixed the drugs, as he, you know, heated it up. I really didn't know what he was doing. You know, I hated to see what he was doing and whatnot. As he shot it up, as he got high, you know what I'm saying? As he went into the stupor, as he came out of it and whatnot. And you cannot go into a subject matter as a photographer, filmmaker, writer, whatever, without knowing what the hell you're getting into. And you got to study it some kind of way. You know, now some artists, poets and writers, it all comes from the inside. But with me, it comes from the inside, yeah, but then I go outside to try to capture the things that interest me most, and it's the people. You got to get into the people, the soul of the people, the soul of the people.
Jimmy, how did the like historic South factor in? Speaking of, you know, the souls of Black folks and the souls of the people, where, yeah, and you know, because the Great Migration was in its winding, its last couple years as the workshop was starting. Yeah, did the historic South like play a role in conversation and in aesthetic or in vision, or yeah, how did it work?
But no, we're not the South. The movement to get a better place. You know, the reason why I'm sitting here with you is because Roy was denied. All right. Gordon Parks was denied from a long time and whatnot. And they tried to tell us, don't stop, because I was denied. And they weren't, and Roy wasn't bitter. Roy was determined to keep working. Keep working, he said. Try to keep working. So I went and got other jobs to keep working. You know, it's not a question of style or mode or anything like that, man. It's a question. It's a question of, you know, you got to keep working. I wish I had a good answer for you, but you know, you get up and you say, I want to finish this thing. You know, but it has to be secluded from me working in a lab, or me being married, or me getting a divorce, which I've done a couple of times. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You can't mix it up. You can't mix your what you're doing up with that. You know, it has to be separate. Kuniala has to be separate. When I'm doing Kuniala, I don't want to hear nothing else. I don't want to. I really don't want to. We bother with nothing too much for Kuniala. Now, other people, I know that Buford Smith and some of the other people in Kamoinge, they can juggle all this agile and all that. I could never do that. I wasn't smart. And I'm fortunate enough to have a person now who has the energy of 5 men, with T.T. Griffith and his staff here. And they're fantastic people. And what we're trying to do now is get my work into digital archives all around the country. We'll make it accessible to them. So I mean, accessible in a way that almost they can't refuse, all right? Because it's gonna be presented in such a fine way. We talk about some of the best labs in New York City, all right? Printing my work. Because I never did have enough time to stay in the dark room like Lou Draper and some of the other photographers. I was either running around the Rupununi in the deserts of Guyana, all right, or running off to Africa to try to catch some uprising over there for Black Journal, or, you know, I was out working. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the dark room. When I was first married in the 60s, 70s, Louise, my wife, beautiful sister, you know, had the dark room for me, and she, you know, kept me in the dark room and whatnot and off the streets. But after that, I was mostly out taking photographs. So I you know, I was out there. But what's happening now with Griffith is that we're trying to bring all that work together. Just over 50,000 negatives that he had, and then I got another maybe 100,000 negatives up in Utica Avenue in storage.
It's wild.
It's over 150,000 negatives, just pure negatives. You know, and we're trying to put this in an archive. It's being digitalized every day. All right. I'm falling in love with this digital thing, but I'm still having a dark room. And we're offering it to, you know, we're trying to offer it to everybody, not just museums, you know, but we offer it to Black churches, white churches and whatnot. The work is important work because it's not about Jimmy Manis. We were out there trying to change things with the soul of Black people, man. We were out there trying to bring that out, you know, so people could see the real side of Black people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm excited to see everything digitized. I mean, from the work I've seen, I think I'm following you on Instagram now. And you're starting to post a lot of your images.
T.T. Griffith Archive, they're doing a great job, man. I'm not plugging it for anything, because I mean, he don't need no plug-in. All right. I mean, the man has a vision, and he's taking me along. I'm on the ship, and I just feel like a little baby being taken care of. I just say, take care of me. I have no problems with it.
So what churches are you interested in you know, working with? Are you going to stick?
I haven't gotten that deep yet, but you know, the overall approach is going to be starting with the very small churches.
Yeah,
you see on Fulton Street and maybe even Fulton Street in the Black community, how it's organized. It's a preacher, a good business person, or not a good business person. It's not going to be a pretty film, I'm telling you that, because the church in our community, you know, you don't need to tell you, it has two sides, like everything else in our community. There's everything else in this society. There's a good side and a bad side.
Mhm.
You know, I don't want to dwell on each, but you got to talk about the bad side.
Mhm.
All right, and just leave it like that, you know, and you got to talk about it in a way which, you know, that's not right, or that's, you know, whatever. All right. But the good side is that we're going to start with the smallest churches and work our way up to these
Mhm.
huge edifices. That's
The mega churches, yeah.
yeah, that's the way it's going to move. And there's going to be a whole lot of juxtaposition in them and whatnot. And Jimmy's still working. We're working on it. It's going to take a little time, but in the next couple of years, and then I'm going to retire.
Yeah. Don't retire. Just
man, you know what I want to do?
you're getting all this attention now. You gotta ride it to the sunset, you know. You gotta.
I had attention before. I was on Guyanese Radio. I had attention. I've been there before. You know, if you were talking to a photographer who was maybe 18 years younger, I said, great. All right. But what I want to do now is get all of this stuff organized, whatnot, with Griffith and whatnot, and go back to photographing when I want.
Yeah.
Okay? And making a little jewelry to sell. That's it. Being on television is great and whatnot if I have to be, like I have to be now, or get spanked, you know. You know, I don't have that long to live, you know, and I want to enjoy it, you know, do what I want to do, you know. But it's going to take a couple of years for us to finish this thing, and I have a managing director now, so hey,
yeah,
you know, let's work.
It's really, really, really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good people too. They're good people. They're honest.
Yeah. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Sorry, Ramel. Go ahead.
No, I said I'm gonna keep up with Jimmy's projects. Yeah, and maybe. Yeah.
Let's keep in touch with each other too. You know, and you know, where are you at? Are you in Brooklyn, or are you in Boston, or where do you live?
Yeah, I'm close to Boston. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island right now.
Okay.
But I drive down to Alabama all the time, and you know, once the pandemic's over, it's a little bit safer. Yeah, we're definitely gonna hang out. Definitely.
Yeah, well, you got to go to New York and whatnot, and you got to see what we're doing here in New York and Brooklyn. And please, you know, you have my address, you have my number. I'm not gonna be hiding from you. And I love to cook.
Yeah.
Okay, Jimmy, we have some questions from our audience that I'd love to.
Is there an audience out there?
Yeah, believe it or not, there really is.
We told him it was practice. We told him it was a practice one.
Exactly. I know you can't see them, but they're really there. And I just wanted to start with one about King is Dead that has to do with the structure of the film. It's interesting, and I know you did some work on TV, and I wondered if that was television, or at least for public television like Black Journal, and I wondered if that influenced your approach to making this film at all, with the kind of interview type style in a way.
Definitely.
And we can even hear someone asking questions. Was I don't know if that was you or one of your crew.
It was me. It was other people too, but it was mostly me. Definitely. Greaves gave us the whole platform for that approach, that journalistic live approach to stuff.
Yeah.
And he didn't put any restrictions on it. We would come back with stuff you could not put on television, you know, but
right.
you know, I guess they got it in their archives up there. But yes, the journalistic TV immediate approach. Right. I learned from Bill Greaves up at the Black Journal, and the whole team up there.
Yeah. And someone asked where it was made and how long it took you to make. Did it happen? Pardon me?
You're talking about King is Dead?
Yes, King is Dead. Yep.
I think we went out. When was he shot? He was shot on I don't know. It was shot on like. He was shot what in 1968? Yeah. It took us. We went out from NYU on I think it was a Thursday. Came back on the weekend. We kept the place open. The janitors there hated us. They had to, you know, watch us to see if we didn't walk out with anything, really. And, we were through with that film Tuesday.
Oh, wow.
It was up
Is
in
that the shooting or the shooting and editing?
oh, everything. I'm telling you,
Everything.
George Hayes, Vika Tarabanov, Fred Arnold, you know, we were in there working, cutting,
Right.
editing. Now we talking about film now. We're not talking about all this y'all got now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Had to be
Yeah.
put together, you know, with glue and stuff. But they was just some great people, and you know, I had to keep the whip on them and whatnot. I mean, we weren't getting paid. We weren't getting paid.
Yeah.
No, we didn't need to get paid because the anger and the fear that was on the street had to be shown, as far as I was concerned.
One other question that came was, and I know you've sort of partially answered this already, but let me state it. So much of your work happens on the street. It's spontaneous yet articulates a deep understanding of the lives of the people you photograph, even though they're strangers to you. Is it an intuitive relationship between you and the moment, or a practice developed over time that allows you to frame people with such intimacy? That was a question.
That's a kind of complicated question because, you know, when taking a photograph, your training comes in. You know, you want to have the right stop. You want to see if the lighting is right. But just take that picture that y'all showed with the man with the all torn up jacket up against the wall. He was a drug addict. Okay, and I to take that picture, I didn't have to do anything. I just had to put the camera up. You know, that's how fast it came. Because I knew that once he knew I was photographing him, the whole mood had changed. I knew that I have to explain after I photographed what I was doing. You know, because you know, are you a cop? What are you doing? Why are you photographing me? You know, and me and him had to talk and whatnot. And once he saw what I was trying to do, you know, but all that comes after, you know, the shot itself came. That's it. You can't play when you're out in the streets. You can't plan like you do in the studio, you know. And they do some beautiful work in studio in Hollywood and whatnot. But all that stuff is planned and laid out and drawn and articulated by this, that, and the other, and schemes and you know. But when you're out there and you see it, get it. That's what Roy did.
It looked like you were shooting really close up too, to some of the people. Really physically close.
People. You know, some photographers are kind of like, but I've never found no intimacy in that. You know, and I've gotten chased a couple of times, but hey, then I wouldn't try to do it now. You know, I get somebody like Griffith to come with his boys to help me out.
Protect you. We had another question. Was the film distributed, and to whom and where?
Yeah, well, I had a small company called Jammy Production. We distributed it. It won some awards. It went to a whole lot of the festivals and whatnot. And commendations and whatnot. And then NYU took it up and started showing it around and whatnot. But it never made me money, you know, but it was around. All the libraries in New York has got a copy, you know. We made sure that most of the institutions in New York, the Black institutions, had a copy, and they bought it. You know? So we were doing a little distributing business.
Did you have any, were you thinking at all about who your audience was while you were making the film?
That same audience that was on Black Journal, the same audience that you saw on the nightly news from NBC and whatnot, that was our audience, the whole community.
Yeah.
We never had the thing that was this is just for Black people. This is Black people, the soul of Black people. But what we're trying to show you is what we got for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Bill would tell us, and Roy, you know, put it out there, man. Don't try to hold on to it and say what you're gonna, you know, this is for Black people, or this is for whoever, you know, because look, I mean, look what happened with the work.
Yeah.
I mean, look, after, okay, he's 60 years, look what's happening with the work.
Yeah.
We're going on to the Getty. Right? These are European institutions. I understand some people are going to jump on me about this, right? But we belong there with these other people. We belong there. Come on, Gary. We belong there.
Well, let me ask you I think we're coming to the close, so there's one more question. For the folks who are dealing with unrest around civil rights and systemic injustice and racism going on right now, what would you tell young Black men and women who want to do something to make a change?
Get into art, even if it's a hobby. Get into art. That's the thing that kept me out of drugs. The thing that kept me out of drugs is my father never denied me money at 9 and 10 years old to go buy film. And you got to understand that film was kind of expensive then for a family of 9 people. Yeah. And half of the other community that used to come in and eat in our house. You know what I'm saying? Money was always a problem, but they always found money to get me off to buy this film and the chemicals. Get into art, get into some kind of art. Have art around your house. Have art in the bathroom. It doesn't have to be Black art, some kind of art you like. And it's going to be rich your life. My life is rich because I don't have a lot of money, but I got people around me that love art. I love art, and I want it around me.
That's great, Jimmy. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you so much for being here. And Ramel, thank you very much. It's been great to hear you both. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all our audience members who are there for joining us tonight. And
thank you.
Hope you'll come see the Working Together exhibition at the Whitney.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan, everyone.
Thank you,
Megan.
Brendan and Megan.
Carrie, I'm looking to meet you personally once this pandemic thing get under control. You got to come to New York. All right. Remember, you promised.
Oh, I am in New York.
Ramel.
Oh no! I will.
Yeah, you gotta, when we get straight and we can make a dinner for you, gotta come to New York. Please.
That'll work.
I want to meet.
Same.
Trace some.
Thank you both.